Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the White House Town Hall on Firearms Secure Storage. I'm Greg Jackson, the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And as a survivor of gun violence, I want to thank you for your leadership, your courage, and your commitment to making our community safer from gun violence. Sadly, gun violence has stolen too many futures, broken too many families, and traumatized too many classrooms in America. We live in a time where there are over 4.6 million homes with children and unsecured firearms, where guns from the home make up over 70% of school shootings, over 80% of unintentional shootings, and over 70% of youth firearm suicides. And that's why we need action. We need leadership, but most importantly, we need champions. And so I'm proud to introduce a major champion in the fight to keep our kids safe, an educator, a doctor, but most of all, our First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And Steph, you've built an amazing team for the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I know that working on this issue is not easy, but this team's commitment never wavers, and we all are so grateful for everything that you do. Ava Olson from Townville, South Carolina, is 13, but her friend Jacob will always be 6. Ava will try out different clothing trends and learn how to drive. She'll have crushes and graduate from high school. But Jacob, now forever dressed in his favorite Batman costume, will always be 6. Ava is a survivor. After years of debilitating PTSD, unable to leave her home, for fear of reliving those moments on the playground when she ran for her life, she then returned to school. But the heaviness of that small coffin will always weigh on her heart. Because Jacob will always be 6. Ethan's song of Guilford, Connecticut will always be 15. Alejandro Guerrero Jr. of Grand Rapids, Michigan will always be 14. I know that we have some of their friends and family with us today. The number of children we've lost to gun violence, to shooting, is unfathomable. But those numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't tell us of the parents who steel themselves as they put their child on the school bus every morning, the students who watch the door instead of the whiteboard, the educators who go over their emergency plans in their heads before the first bell. Like many of all of you, I know that feeling. I teach at a community college not far from here. I was there this morning. And at the start of each semester, I explain to my students what they should do if the worst happens. But we can help prevent that violence. You can help prevent that violence. The parents in your schools trust you. They look to you to steer their children toward the bright futures ahead of them. You can show parents that they can be part of preventing the next shooting, the next suicide, the next accident. A secured gun could have saved Jacob and Alejandro and Ethan. It could mean they would be starting high school or college or their first job. They could have grown up beside their friends like it really should have been. I know we ask a lot of our educators, and I know that these shootings affect you too. So I want to thank you for all that you've already done, for coming here, to be willing to push a little harder, and to do this one more thing. This issue matters to the president. It weighs on his heart every day, and he's not going to stop fighting until we've solved it. How can we accept a world where the leading cause of death for our children is gun violence, where active shooter drills are part of growing up in America, where our children hear loud noises and duck for cover? Enough is enough. Enough pain, enough death. No more funerals. I don't want to have to put my hand on another cross with an 8-year-old's name. We must change this. We must protect our kids from gun violence. Thank you for all that you do. And now, please help me welcome someone who is fighting for our students and our educators every single day. My favorite, Secretary Miguel Cardona. Thank you, everybody.
Our First Lady. Thank you to our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. It's hard to think of a greater champion for students, someone who truly cares deeply for their well-being and their safety. And I'm grateful to the National Association of Elementary School Principals, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and the American Federation of School Administrators. Let's give them a round of applause. And all of the school principals here for taking time to join this important conversation. I got to say, principals, that is the best job in education. I'm a little biased. It's the longest I held the job. It is the best job. And welcome also to our other guests from the education community, parents, teachers, and most importantly, our students. Students, please stand up. Current students, please stand up. Thank you. We're here today for one simple reason: to protect the lives of children, of young people, and educators. And we wanted to bring together school principals in particular because you're the trusted voices in your schools and you're the credible leaders in your communities. You're the ones that can really get things done that saves lives in the future, to prevent violence instead of just reacting to it. The principalship is truly where the rubber meets the road. I was reminded of the stakes earlier this week. Just 72 hours ago, I was walking through Building 1200 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And I know Principal Michelle Keffert is here today. The building has been frozen in time since that horrible day almost 6 years ago. I walked over shattered glass. I saw bullet holes through walls and through desks. But I also saw Valentine's Day chocolates left unopened. I saw balloons deflated over time. A stark reminder of that terrible day. I heard the stories of the 14 students who were killed that day, standing over the spaces where they took their last breath. In some cases that morning, I was standing next to the parent of the murdered child. I heard about the heroism of the teacher, Scott Beagle, and the assistant football coach, Aaron Feast, and Chris Hickson, the athletic director, who each lost their lives trying to save the lives of students. I also spoke to Stacy Lipple, a teacher who had to witness the murder of her colleagues and students. I'm amazed by the courage of those family members who suffer visiting that site. But they did it that day because they wanted to make sure that we understood what happened there and that I could take the lessons learned and bring it back to D.C. And as I walked, I was reminded of serving as a principal myself in Connecticut when Principal Dawn Hochsprung lost her life at Sandy Hook Elementary School, who ran immediately toward the sound of gunshots without a second thought. I was reminded of attending the wake for 4 9-year-olds and a murdered teacher in Uvalde less than 2 years ago. And the teacher's husband was being buried also because he died of a heart attack just days after his wife was murdered. And I was reminded of visiting Perry, Iowa just last month, meeting the amazing students, the teachers and the staff that make up that wonderful community, and then the devastation of learning of the January 4th shooting at Perry High School and the death of Principal Dan Marburger, a hero in every sense of the word who loved his students and he loved his school. So in memory of Dan and for all those who lost their lives and for those whose lives were changed forever, I'd like to ask you in joining me in a moment of silence to honor them. Thank you. As we recognize them today, let's also be clear. We don't honor their memory with complacency. We don't honor their memory with thoughts and prayers. We don't honor their memory by praising their heroism only to turn around and fight to protect assault weapons over the lives of children. We don't honor their memory by putting all the burden on principals to secure their schools and educators to be frontline defenders, despite the fact that no school lock is a match for an AR-15. Not when gun violence is the leading cause of death for our nation's children. Let me say that again. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for our nation's children. Not when we have a student mental health crisis in this country where 1 in 3 high school girls has seriously considered suicide in the last 3 years. Where every year 3,100 young people die by firearm suicide. A crisis that can only get worse with the threats of trauma of gun violence. This is going to demand action on every front, and it bears repeating. We're here to protect the lives of children. We need all hands on deck. And if we do only what we've done, we're going to get the same results we've gotten. We must all step up. We're talking about, today what we're talking about is safe firearm storage. That's one strategy in a whole suite of strategies that we must pursue. Real gun control, banning assault weapons, investing in mental health, and smart prevention measures. Safe firearm storage is one of the biggest areas where our community of school principals can help save lives right away. We know that between 70 to 90% of guns used in youth suicides, unintentional shootings among children, and school shootings perpetrated by shooters under the age of 18 are acquired from the home or the homes of relatives or friends. That's a staggering number, up to 90%. And if just half of those households with children that contain at least one unlocked gun switched to locking all of their guns, 1/3 of youth gun suicides and unintentional deaths could be prevented, saving an estimated 251 young lives in a single year. Now, every community and every school is different. What works to engage people and families on safe firearm storage in one place may not work somewhere else. I was really clear with my team. We cannot and we will not come to school principal with a one-size-fits-all prescription and unrealistic expectations. Look, I was a school principal myself. I know how it can feel. You know, here we go, just another thing now that we have to do. all in spite of all the mouths you have to feed as principal, all the tasks that you have, all the pressures that you have, often without recognition of what you do right, and a lot of blame when things don't go well. But I also know this. As school principals, you have a unique ability to communicate with your school community, especially parents, in a way that's effective and credible. You know what works. Principals, you are the trusted leader in your community, and you are the messenger. And you have the leverage, not only to reach parents, but to go to community leaders like the mayor or the police chief and really make a case for what will make your school safer. A bit later, we'll be hearing from the experts who will give you a sense of the resources and strategies that may help you do this in your school and in your community. Look, I know there are so many demands on you as school principals. You know, the First Lady said it, the pressures that you have on you. But the fact is, every day, school principals across the country are thinking about their emergency plans and are thinking about the safety, thinking about how to make their buildings safer. If together, collectively, if we're not prioritizing saving the lives of children in our schools and creating a stronger sense of safety for them, we can't expect them to be able to move the needle on reading or math or all the other things that are so crucial to their education. And as much as I'm speaking to you today as the Secretary of Education and a fellow school principal, I'm also speaking to you as a father of a high schooler and a student in college. I'm speaking to you as a husband whose wife walks into a school every single day. I want the same for my own family that I want for every family in this country, to know that our loved ones are safe. This is about protecting lives. It's about preventing the unthinkable. There's nothing more important. So let's get to work together. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce someone who knows these issues in and out, a leader who has been fighting passionately to tackle gun violence and now serves as the director of the White House Office on Gun Violence Prevention. Let's welcome Steph Feldman. Steph?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Secretary Cardona, for dedicating your leadership and voice as both a former principal and, of course, as the current U.S. Secretary of Education, and lending your voice to our shared mission of reducing gun violence and saving lives. President Biden and Vice President Harris have made historic progress to reduce gun violence. President Biden signed into law the most significant gun safety legislation in nearly 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And the Biden-Harris administration, with the help of Secretary Cardona and so many others, have taken more executive action than any other presidential administration to reduce gun violence, period, in history. We are keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals, cracking down on the trafficking of firearms across state lines, investing in gun crime prevention intervention, and so much more. But still, as the First Lady said, President Biden still finds himself in rooms with families who have lost loved ones to gun violence. He has spent countless hours with these family members, sitting with them in their grief, and he keeps hearing the same message: do something. Do something. President Biden is going to continue to call on Congress to take action to reduce gun violence, including by banning assault weapons that are so frequently used in school shootings, weapons of war that leave law enforcement outgunned. In the meantime, though, he's going to keep doing everything he can within his existing authority. That's why just last fall, President Biden established the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention and asked Vice President Harris to oversee this work. Today, our office is proud to partner with the Department of Education and Department of Justice on new steps to promote safe storage of firearms, one critical tool in the toolkit of reducing gun violence and saving lives. So as the First Lady and Secretary Cardona expressed so effectively, you as principals here in person and online, you are trusted voices in your communities. And I hear from you that you want to do everything you can to keep your students and educators safe. That's why many principals across the country have already led the way by sending letters to families about safe storage of firearms. But you have a lot on your plates, and you should not have to be experts on safe storage of firearms. So we're here to help. President Biden and Vice President Harris are here to help. Today, the United States Department of Education issued a new template that principals and school leaders can use to engage with parents and families about the importance of safe firearm storage and encourage more people to take preventive action by safely storing firearms. On top of that, the U.S. Department of Justice also released today a guide on safe storage of firearms, and they're providing more subject matter expertise on different types of storage devices and best practices for safely storing firearms. This is, in fact, the most comprehensive guide on safe storage ever released by the federal government. So I'm urging all principals to consider how you can use these new tools to effectively reach families in your community. It is a simple step that can save lives. And now, it is my great privilege to turn the microphone over to Principal Michelle Kefford.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here with you today. I would like to thank the White House staff, as well as the Department of Education, for this invitation to speak to you today about the collective need to do more to protect our K-12 schools, reduce and prevent gun violence, and to aid in the recovery for those who have unfortunately already suffered tragic shootings. I'd like to take an opportunity to sincerely thank Secretary Cardona and your staff for visiting my campus just this week to witness firsthand the atrocities that happen as a result of gun violence on a school campus. So thank you. My name is Michelle Kefford. I'm the proud principal of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Stoneman Douglas is a very special place for me, not only because I have the privilege of leading the school, but because I started my career there almost 25 years ago as a teacher of biology, where I served students for 6 years. Both of my children are Stoneman Douglas Eagles. My oldest graduated in 2022, and my youngest is with me as a sophomore. A year after the horrific mass shooting that occurred on our campus in 2018, I was asked to come back home to Stoneman Douglas to lead the school in its continuous recovery efforts that are still very real and very active today. I think it's important for you to know that in addition to being Stoneman Douglas's principal, I am also a resident of the city of Parkland. I experienced the horrific shooting as a community member alongside my neighbors and my fellow Parklanders. But I also experienced this tragedy as a parent, as a mother who received a panic text from her then 8th grade son. There's a code red at school, Mom, and it's not a drill. A son whose portable classroom was just steps away from where 17 were horrifically murdered and 17 others injured. He was locked in a portable classroom with students from Stoneman Douglas that his teacher had pulled into safety. Students who witnessed firsthand the horrors of the shooter. Nothing is more terrifying to a parent than their child being in a situation that is life or death. Although it's been almost 6 years since the most horrific day in our school's history, the impacts of this tragedy are still very real today. It affects our whole school community very profoundly, and our recovery efforts are still actively underway. In addition to serving as a principal, I am also a former National Association of Secondary School Principals, NASSP, State Principal of the Year, as well as a former NASSP National Principal of the Year finalist. I am also a member of the NASSP Principal Recovery Network, a club no one wants to be a part of. The Principal Recovery Network, or PRN, as we refer to ourselves, is made up of 21 current as well as former school principals who, like me, suffered a shooting on their school campus or assumed leadership after a shooting to lead the long and arduous road to recovery. The group was founded by NASSP with the help of Frank DeAngelis, the former principal of Columbine High School. He had been doing this work alone since 1999 and brought us together to do the work collectively. The PRN includes principals of Sandy Hook, Chardon, Aztec, but also includes principals of schools where the tragedy didn't grab nonstop national media attention. Forest, West Liberty, Salem, Harrisburg. These are just some of our PRN member schools that may not ring in your mind as acutely as Stoneman Douglas or Sandy Hook, because the coverage of the shooting was not national and nonstop. But they represent the hundreds of school shootings and the tens of thousands of community members who have been impacted and affected over the past few decades. Each of these tragedies leaves an immense amount of trauma and a scar that never fully heals on the entire school community and neighboring cities. Several PRN members were themselves shot in their tragedies. Still, despite the trauma, this heroic group of leaders reaches out to every single school that suffers a school shooting and offers advice, guidance, and support to the principal and the district on best practices for recovery. We work closely with the Department of Education to coordinate outreach efforts, as well as with the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity, Infrastructure, and Safety Agency to advise on their excellent suite of school safety products and resources. We have produced the PRN Guide to Recovery that we released last August at an event at the Columbine Memorial in Colorado. The guide is a collection of our lived experiences, our strategies and interventions that help to serve as counsel for school leaders who face the unimaginable. The guide can be found, it's free to download, nassp.org/PRN. I encourage every school leader to please access a copy. There is no course in our principal certification programs that instructs us on how to navigate the aftermath of a mass shooting. So we were forced to create our own resources. Sadly, the PRN's work to care for and support fellow educators, staff, and precious students has become devastatingly frequent in recent years. In 2023, there were at least 346 incidents of gunfire on school grounds in this country. That's according to the K-12 school shooting database. That is the most ever recorded. 249 students and educators were either killed or wounded in these tragedies. Although we often only hear about the most horrific incidents, we are averaging with those numbers a school shooting almost every day. Almost every day. And with so many shootings, there is simply not enough state or federal prevention and recovery funding and resources to go around for all of these shattered schools. If safety in school is not prioritized, how will educators remain in this profession, especially as we face a growing nationwide educator shortage? How will students focus on meaningful and impactful learning? As a member of the NASSP PRN, we come together out of necessity and a shared life mission and a commitment to make a difference. We implore you all to help us work together as a country to enact solutions. We have to do more as school principals now than ever to keep our buildings safe and to help our parents keep their children safe. There's more our elected leaders can do to give schools the needed critical preventative resources and to enact policies necessary to protect students and our staff. The time to act is now, and to spread the word about what's already working and how we can implement more in schools across the country so that we ensure we are supporting as many communities and as many schools as possible. Thank you. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome back the champion for this work, Secretary Cardona, to the podium.
Thank you. I'm going to invite a colleague who's going to be making some remarks from the ATF. I'll let him introduce himself. And Steph, we're going to be doing the questions from the audience now, so I'm going to make my way over here. And why don't you introduce yourself first, Jeff, and then we'll get to the questions.
Is this on? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be here for this very important meeting. My name is Jeffrey Matthews, and I'm currently a Deputy Assistant Director with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives for the Department of Justice.
Jeff, why don't we do this right? Why don't you take the podium and do your remarks from over there, and then we'll do the questions after. Okay?
Perfect, thank you. So again, I'm Jeffrey Matthews. I'm a Deputy Assistant Director with ATF, and I'm very excited and honored to be here and assist in the discussion regarding safe storage and responsible gun ownership. The mission of ATF is to protect our communities from violent criminals, the illegal use and trafficking of firearms, the illegal use and storage of explosives, as well as acts of arson and bombings. I've been a special agent with ATF for over 23 years. Prior to my time with ATF, I was a Border Patrol agent for several years and a United States Marine. I have handled and possessed firearms daily for close to 30 years professionally. But that doesn't take away my responsibility to handle firearms safely as well every day. And the importance really is driven home about this meeting to me because not only am I a law enforcement officer, but I'm also the husband to a wife who works in the school system, or public school system in the county in which we live. She works at the front desk, and she grants access to visitors all day to that school. And when I told her about this opportunity to come here today, that's one of the things we talked about. And she said every time she lets someone in, that thought crosses her mind. Further, I have 2 children, and one is in high school, one is now in college. And I can tell you that this safe, responsible gun ownership and safe storage, it's not just the person that owns the gun, but it's really is a responsibility of the entire family. And I don't know that there's been an evening, or if there has been, I can count it on one hand, over the past 25 years that I've come home and my wife hasn't said, have you secured your gun yet? Have you locked it up? Every night. And I thank her for that. You know, it's not offensive to me. I think the responsibility, choosing to own a firearm, you're taking on an immense responsibility to safeguard it properly. Safe storage of firearms serves to increase public safety. It helps protect our children from unsupervised access to firearms, and it lessens the chance that your firearm will be used in a crime. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, everyone knows someone that works in a school, and people sometimes say, well, schools have so much responsibility and principals have so much responsibility. I'm joined here by Deputy Secretary Cindy Martin, who is a superintendent, a school principal. We talk about this. This is a different time. And we all have to step up. I'm reminded Max and Fred, parents of students who were murdered at Parkland. We all have to step up. We all have to do more. And principals, I mentioned your trusted messengers, but oftentimes the principals are the leaders in their communities. That we're not saying you have to do the work, but you're the leaders. You're going to bring people together, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here. At this portion, we want to take questions from the audience. And I have folks' names that I'm going to call out, and I'm going to ask them to please stand and ask the question to the member of the panel here that will respond, okay? So the first question is from George Roberts. Where are you, George? Hi, George. How you doing? Good, good. George is part of the principal recovery. He's a member of the principal recovery group, the unfortunate group that has to come together to think about these things. Thank you for that resource, that amazing resource that's available online to principals across the country. Thank you for the work you do on that and for your service as a school principal. You're a former principal at Perry Hall High School in Baltimore, Maryland. Is that right?
That's correct. Baltimore County, Maryland.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
What is your question?
Thank you, and thank you, panelists, for being here. So, as the former principal of Perry Hall High School, my school suffered the tragedy, the ultimate tragedy, a school shooting on the very first day of school. So it was August of 2012 when a sophomore student came into our cafeteria and opened fire with 500 students in the cafeteria. So as we can imagine, the devastation was deep, it was wide, and 12 years later, it still continues. We never look at the first day of school the same way. So my question really is around what can the federal government continue to do, what does it do, and what can it continue to do in the short, mid, and really in our case, the long term, when it comes to fiscal solutions in the immediate, but also the mental health, the social emotional support that communities like mine and really all of the school communities that suffer these shootings can benefit from the federal government.
Thanks for that question.
Absolutely.
I said earlier, Cindy and I both, we come into this role as not only parents, but as educators and school principals. First and foremost, at the federal level, we need to be present and I need to speak up. She needs to speak up. We're asking principals to do something that 10 years ago, maybe we didn't ask principals. I'm not asking principals to do something that I'm not willing to do myself as a Secretary of Education. I spent more time in the last 3 months supporting violence prevention efforts, visiting schools, speaking to family members of those who were gunned down, because it's important and I have a platform and I'm going to use it to say I have to do more. You heard about the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, right? $2 billion to increase mental health supports, a total of 14,000 social workers, school psychologists, school counselors, okay? Another $1 billion for Stronger Connections, which allows schools to have dollars to do everything from creating, putting cameras up to make sure that your wife feels safer when she can see who's coming up and they can show their license, to maybe getting a bunch of those gun locks and having an event at the school. The schools decide. I said before, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You know better what your school needs than I do as Secretary of Education. So there are more dollars in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act to provide mental health support and strengthen school safety plans than ever before. I've been in education 25 years. But that's short term. Long term, we're working with Health and Human Services at the President's direction. He was very clear with me at a cabinet meeting. Me and Javier Becerra fixed the Medicaid reimbursement process so that children with behavioral health and mental health, those districts could get reimbursed if they're Medicaid students. That's long-term money for social workers, for school counselors. So there's money there that we want to provide. And if you look at our budget proposals, look at the President's budget proposals. People say your budget is a reflection of your values. There's more requests there for mental health supports, because if we go back to the schools that we had in 2019, we're failing our kids. Mental health has to undergird everything that we do. We need to make sure that our local budgets, we're pushing for that as well. We're working very closely with states. We have technical assistance centers here at the Department of Education, because money's only half the issue, right? We need to provide technical assistance, support, listen to our states, what they need, and we need to be responsive to it. But we're going to continue fighting for it. We recognize mental health is something that we need to capitalize on. And if you look at our agenda at the Department of Education, mental health is right up there with improving reading scores and providing pathways to college. All right, I can keep going, but I know we have some other questions. It's really important that we model what we expect to see at every level. Question number 2 comes from Melissa Schindel, principal of Glenwood Middle School in Maryland, 2023 Advocacy Champion of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for offering this space for us to talk. And so what you said really resonates with me, because every time someone comes to the door, it is always on our minds who's coming through our doors. And so my question's a little bit different than George's question, but we know that many of the guns causing harm in our communities are coming from the home, whether that's targeted violence, whether that's self-injurious behavior, whether it's accidental. And so how can we, as principals and school leaders and districts, partner with our communities and help work with parents to help them understand different ways that they can safely store their guns, store their firearms rather, and maybe some of the different types of ways to safely store their firearms?
Thank you for the question. It's a fantastic question. I believe the best starting point, ma'am, would be for principals to provide, I believe it was just mentioned in some of the opening comments, the Department of Education's, their new communication template, which would start the conversation. I believe that the principals and school leaders can use that to engage with the parents and families about the importance of safe firearms storage and responsible gun ownership. Second, I believe it will be active today. I would recommend DOJ has a safe firearms storage brochure as well. That's close to 13 to 14 pages, and it has outstanding best practices and procedures to safely storing firearms in the home. That would be the first part of your question as to what the community should know. I think that this is one of the things as well, as principals, you guys are uniquely positioned to have a platform to talk to your parents to impart the safely storing firearms. It's crucial to preventing risks of unintentional death, injury, and the loss of firearms in the community. And I don't think that nearly almost all firearm accidents in the home, I believe, are preventable if people are responsible gun owners and simply secure their firearm away. We were talking about it a little bit earlier today. Just several days ago, a 3-year-old child in this country found an unsecured firearm and shot and killed a 2-year-old sibling. We can go on and on with those stories. And I do feel very strongly that a lot of that is preventable. I think that DOJ has done a fantastic job coming up with a safe storage guide, as well as the Department of Education getting behind that effort and with the template that's going out for you as well. I do have a couple of things that I brought with me to show today to show you just really how easy it kind of can be. If you have to have access to your firearm, a loaded firearm in your house, there are some options to it. So I brought 3 things here. I brought a cable lock, which quickly affixes to a firearm, usually through the barrel or through the action of the weapon. And I also brought a trigger lock as well. This kind of affixes and prevents the functioning of the trigger. And really, these 2 items are good, especially if there are young children in the house, because it does prevent and deter unauthorized use of the weapon. However, they're not as successful in deterring theft, whereas if you have a gun safe or a lockbox, which is an example here, and actually all of this stuff has been issued to me by ATF, so this is probably one of your better options. So, and to really further describe this, I don't want to put anyone to sleep here, but the actual terminology for it, the safety device that when installed on a firearm is designed to prevent the firearm from being operated without first deactivating the device. Second, which that's the cable lock. The second item would be considering a device that's incorporated into the design of the firearm that is designed to prevent the operation of the firearm by anyone not having access to the device. And then a gun safe or gun case or lockbox or other device that is designed to be or can be used to store a firearm. So the one thing I will add, and we see it very often, through my position as an ATF agent, I've come into contact with multiple people possessing firearms, obviously, and I've seen everything from people using zip ties, string, rope, bolt flags. That is not secure and safe storage. Some people may think it is, and again, I think as educators, you all realize that really it comes down to education. I think that letting people know what is and is not safe storage, because not everyone has dealt with firearms throughout their professional life, and so I think that this initiative is fantastic. I think that your template from the Department of Education that starts a conversation, followed up by the Department of Justice Safe Storage Firearms brochure, is fantastic.
Thank you for that. You want to jump in with us?
Yeah, if I can just jump in very quickly. I just think that expert advice is so helpful to help understand the different types of safe storage options that are available. That if you have a toddler you're trying to prevent from getting a gun, you might want to use a different type of safe storage than if you have a 17-year-old who's a little more advanced and might be able to break through this cable lock. You might need a different tool. And that's something you shouldn't have to know as principals, which is why I'm so grateful to the Department of Justice for putting out that information. And then the last thing, just really quickly, I want to say is I want everyone to know that the President is calling on Congress to enact legislation requiring all gun owners to safely store their firearms. In fact, one piece of legislation that would do exactly that is named after Ethan Song, whose mother is in this room today. But we don't have to wait for Congress to act in order to take action in our homes and in our schools, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. We all have to do more. The president is pushing for more too. And I appreciate, every good principal appreciates when teachers bring in realia, right? Right? So thank you for bringing those in. That little orange one, how much does that cost about?
Approximately $10. Possibly.
$10, right? Think about it. How many parents wish they had that? So the goal here today is bring awareness, right? The goal here is to bring awareness. This is kind of uncharted territory with principals that we have to deal with the trauma after. I would rather spend a little bit of time on prevention. All right, question number 3, Aaron Huff, NASSP president, secondary school principal president, principal Benjamin Bowes High School in Indiana. Nice to see you, Aaron.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for the administration's persistence on this critical topic. Organizations like NASSP, NAESP, and the American Federation of School Administrators, as well as all the other organizations who are represented here today, aim to develop and support school administrators addressing this issue weekly and sometimes daily. NASSP has focused its efforts on interagency collaboration, as well as emergency response to schools and communities who are impacted. So my question is, how can school leaders collaborate with diverse community partners, including those with varying perspectives on responsible gun ownership, along with local law enforcement and justice offices, to enhance community intervention strategies while prioritizing safe and welcoming schools?
Yeah, right. There's a balance, right? Let me start with that one, and just feel free to jump in. So, Aaron, thank you for being here. I see Earl here, too, in the Federation. Your presence here means a lot. It's one thing if we were saying this, you being here, you recognizing that, look, there's no perfect answer or one-size-fits-all, but we're in this together, man. And I think your question about how do we bring diverse perspectives together, we're talking about kids' lives. If that can't bring people together with different perspectives, notice we're not talking about don't have them. You said something to me in the back. I don't know if you said in your remarks. How many guns are there in this country?
Estimated in excess of 400 million.
400 million. That's more than the population of our country. So what we're saying is just keep them safe. So this is why I think principals are critical, right? Look, people know their school teacher, they know their school principal, they love their schools. I'm not saying that principals need to lead this themselves. I'm saying you're the trusted people in the community. You talk about diverse stakeholders. This is not a red or blue issue. This is a kid issue, right? When I was a school principal, we had a lot of different perspectives in there. But at the end of the day, I knew that I could bring parents together, and they trusted that I was looking out for their kid. So maybe school principals could partner with the PTA president, with the police chief, in different communities, church elders, right? The pastors in some communities, bring them together on a shared message. This is not about judging. Judgment-free conversations about how to keep kids safe. We've, in this country, normalized, and rightfully so, the accessibility of Narcan. We should be doing the same thing with this stuff. How many kids? 3,100? I said the number, I think it's suicide. We should be normalizing, and how better to do that than for principals to lead that charge, to say, I'm going to bring together parents, I'm going to bring together community, church members, a law enforcement, and create a culture where this is normal. How we talked a lot in the last several years about destigmatizing mental health? Let's destigmatize this conversation. And again, we have strategies, and thank you, Jeff, for mentioning the template. This morning, I sent to principals across the country a template, or a Dear Colleague letter, and it has attached to it a template. Change it up, make it your own, and start that conversation. Check in with the police chief, law enforcement, to say, hey, look, I want to do something, whether it's in a building or in a community center. Let's work together on this. I'll get the parents there. It has to be judgment-free, so we don't make people feel uncomfortable going. And you know what? I'll be honest with you, Aaron, you know this. Principals learn best from principals. I bet you, if we were to poll people in the room, the smartest person in the room is always the room itself, right? You have great ideas. Maybe some of the principals in your network have done things like this already. So for me, it's about opening that door to the conversation. You don't have to do all the work, but because you're a trusted leader, bringing together, and I appreciate the word diverse perspectives. This is not a red or blue issue, man. This is a kid issue. And I think if we keep kids at the center, we're going to be more successful. Thanks for that question. Anyone else want to answer on that? All right, question number 4. Naya McCants, principal of Early College School at Delaware State University. Welcome.
Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I am the proud principal of Early College School at Delaware State University, located in Dover, Delaware. And I'm also a member of the National Association of Secondary School Principals, serving and representing my proud state of Delaware. As Michelle Kefford had stated, and as the part of the Principal Recovery Network, we share powerful stories, recommendations, and valuable lessons learned lived through these tragedies that we're all talking about today. One of the goals is to harness lessons learned from the tragedies and turn towards prevention before they happen. So we appreciate the White House and with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, the initiatives that we're currently pursuing. So my question is twofold. What role do you see for the leaders who have already experienced a school shooting? And also, how can we harness the lessons learned from tragedy and turn towards prevention?
Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and I know especially for you and other principals. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. I know for you and so many other principals in this room who have experienced gun violence in your school setting, it can be tough to come into this conversation and to bring yourself back to that moment. And so I just really am grateful that you, as the president would say, you are turning your pain into purpose in order to prevent others from having to experience that. We here in the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, I want this to be a two-way conversation in the months ahead regarding what we can do to better support you in your efforts to reduce gun violence and respond to gun violence. The fact that you already, as an association, have pulled together your lessons learned is vital in the work we're doing as the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. In fact, one of the key responsibilities that President Biden and Vice President Harris tasked my office with is thinking about how we better coordinate federal support for communities impacted by gun violence when it happens. We know that the FBI, ATF will often go to the scene after a mass shooting happens. We also have the Department of Education showing up and being supportive. The United States Department of Agriculture showing up and being supportive. The VA. We are all here to help and identify resources that can be available through the federal government. One of my deputies, Greg Jackson, deployed to Lewiston, Maine after the shooting in Maine just a few months ago. But we have a lot to learn, and we're in the early stages of figuring out how we as a federal government better support communities after gun violence. As I said, we just started last fall, so we want to listen and hear from you regarding what you think works in the community. When you talk about how do we move from response to prevention, what that makes me think of is one father who lost his daughter in Parkland has told me, I am so sad that I started in this fight after I lost my child. And I think about that all the time. As someone who has not personally lost a loved one to gun violence, but has grown to know so many amazing people in this movement, the message that this father has is that we just can't wait. We can't wait until this issue arrives on our doorstep or at our front entrance. And so that is why the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention is taking a comprehensive approach to reduce gun violence. Again, safe storage is a tool. It is one tool in the toolkit for gun violence prevention. We also have funding through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act for mental health supports in our schools. We have resources for you to think about how you build a safe school in terms of the physical infrastructure. We are cutting down, we're cutting back trafficking of firearms. We're making sure that we're keeping guns out of hands where they shouldn't be. A range of strategies that we're taking and coordinating through the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention to drive forward this agenda by the President and the Vice President. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. It's going to come from Kevin Lean from, he's also a member of the Principal Recovery Group. He's from Harrisburg High School in South Dakota. There you are. Welcome, Kevin.
I wake up dead. Most of the time after a school shooting, a little groggy in the pre-dawn, and I'm transported back to my office in 2015. And a 15-year-old with faraway eyes points a gun at my head. What happened at that time was the bullet went through my arm and hit me in the chest and knocked me to the floor, and I was saved by my assistant principal who's here today, Mr. Ryan Rollinger. But in the dream, his mark is true, and I wake up dead. Just like my colleague from Perry, Mr. Marburger, in that instant, taken away, a brother, a husband, a father, a teacher, a coach, and a friend. All because we were just doing our job. You know, for a long time I've struggled. I live in this country. I'm realistic. I understand that maybe there's got to be a middle ground if we want to make progress. But I'm having a hard time finding a country like this that allows the manufacture of weapons that are simply for maiming and killing other human beings. And they do that in an instant, and then they maim and kill other human beings mentally forever. Something has to change. My urge to the committee, I really appreciate the proposals that you've offered today. I hope there's a intentionality of maybe in local communities finding those experts and those leaders, and within that template, making sure those trusted people can zealously educate on gun safety, educate on accountability and responsibility, and take away, you know, like that 15-year-old with the faraway eyes, opportunity meeting motive and potential. I got to tell you, we have to just get done with this personal and national nightmare. I know I'm getting old and I just need some sleep. And so do you. So I urge the committee, go forward with zealousness. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I always am amazed, those who have experienced this personally, how the courage and strength that they have to continue to fight. We owe you action. We owe you action. Any reflections from the panel on his remarks?
No, I'll just close by saying thank you for lending all of your time and your voice. And this is the start of a conversation, not the end of a conversation that I know we're going to be having all across the country. And a privilege to be here today.
Thank you. Jeff?
No, thank you. I would just like to say that, I mean, and sir, you had mentioned it earlier today, there are estimated over 400 million firearms in this country. Arguably, that's more firearms than we have citizens. It's one of those things that whether you're pro-gun or anti-gun, at the end of the day, we have to sponsor responsible gun ownership. We have to push safe gun storage. I think it's so critical to firearm safety. Safe firearm storage is a pillar of responsible gun ownership. And again, no matter what side of the coin you fall on, I think that responsible gun ownership and safe storage is our best answer.
I think you're right. And I think, you know, who better than principals to bring people together around protecting children, right? And you're not alone in this, man. We're with you. You know, I think whether it was looking in the face of parents after the Sandy Hook tragedy, which took place 35 minutes away from the school where I was serving as principal, and telling those parents I'm going to do everything I can. Or fast forward and visiting and speaking to teachers in Uvalde 4 or 5 days after, and them looking me in the eyes with tears saying, please do more. Or experiencing the walk through Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School with parents, with spouses of deceased, who are saying, I'm willing to walk through the school with you because I hope it can influence you so you can continue to do more. Or having a conversation with the superintendent of Perry, Iowa, who on his first day back from the holiday break had to lead at a time that there's no playbook. Whether it's school principal, teacher, superintendent, there's no playbook. But I'm going to say this to principals. We didn't sign up for this. But we didn't sign up for a pandemic. And you led with courage, with student-centeredness, and you led our school reopening during a pandemic. We didn't go to school for that either. You led with grace, compassion. You brought a community together that was divided at the time, and you kept the students at the center. Well, we have another problem in this country right now, and we didn't sign up for it, but we chose to be leaders. We chose to be leaders, and I ask you again as your secretary, lead with students at the center of the conversation, lead by bringing people together, lead by making sure that we recognize there's no one simple solution. You're not leading alone. We're in this together. And remember, at the end of the day, when it gets hard, we're protecting the lives of children. Thank you for being here today.